How does revenue management software account for the human side of changing pricing, especially I would say on the renewal side?
Revenue management tools are just that. They're tools. You certainly have to layer in the human element.
So today we have Greg from Revvy joining us to discuss all the different factors that can impact rental rates and how to maximize those rates themselves.
Greg Warner, the founder of Revvy, revenue management tool. We also have a couple more tools, a market manager, reputation manager. I'm passionate about revenue management. We spent a lot of time when we built out the product with the renewal workflow. It's something that does take a significant amount of time, even with automated processes. We essentially pull all of your daily activity in every single night. We really want to accommodate what our clients are trying to achieve.
Hi everyone and welcome to Beyond Rent. Determining rental rates isn't easy. There's lots of factors to consider, and if you're wrong, it can impact occupancy and the bottom line. So today we have Greg from Revvy joining us to discuss all the different factors that can impact rental rates and how to maximize those rates themselves. So Greg, welcome to Beyond Rent.
Joe, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking about pricing strategies, new lease, renewal, all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for taking some time out. Obviously, how much a company charges for a particular home or unit really is important, right? And a lot of time is spent thinking about that, making sure it's the right amount. So I'm interested to hear all of your insights and thoughts on what operators can do to maximize those numbers. But before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Greg Warner, the founder of Revvy, revenue management tool. We also have a couple more tools, a market manager, reputation manager. Been doing revenue management for the past 10 years or so. Started Revvy a few years back, and it has been super exciting. I'm passionate about revenue management. So yeah, it's awesome to look at how the market's shifting around, how you can leverage a revenue management tool to keep up with the market, per se, in addition to looking at your own, property level data, kind of combining all of that to come up with an optimized price.
Yeah, that's great. And so you have a lot of experience in revenue management. And I'd like to know a little bit more about how you got started in our industry, kind of maybe where you started or what even piqued your interest in the revenue management side of things to kind of set you on that path, because there's lots of different angles to our industry and revenue management is just one of them.
Yeah, exactly. So back in 2013, my last semester of college, I knew of a property management company. It was local here in Utah. And I just gave them a call to see if they had any internships. And internship ended up working out, turned into a full-time gig. I started out as a revenue management analyst with this company. And yes, bounced around a little bit in the industry and decided there was room in the market for a new revenue management product that has maybe more of a user-friendly UI, UX, easier on the eyes, all that stuff. So yeah, it's been an awesome journey.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you have experience working for a property management company, specifically analyzing revenue and understanding what's happening in that space. So given your experience, you have a lot of hands-on experience, and I'm sure you use in your current role with Revvy. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like and how your experience shapes how you view the current product that you work on?
Yeah, definitely. So Revvy was built with the end user in mind. So I've worked both on the operations side and the software side of things over the past decade or so. So building a product that property managers can log in and quickly make an educated pricing decision, understand how their property is doing in relation to the competition, how their property is doing in relation to their goals, budgeted occupancies, has been really awesome. So it's not just a huge data dump within the revenue management tool. There are a lot of visuals, easy to digest, things like that.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about this topic. Let's get into what we want to actually discuss today and talk about revenue management, setting rates, things like that. So as somebody's approaching this maybe for the first time, or maybe they're from outside of the revenue management side of our industry, what are some different strategies or tactics that somebody may employ as they think about setting rates?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for the folks that currently don't use revenue management, it's quite tedious to understand exactly where you should be pricing your units. It's a very manual process, and it takes a lot of time. So with Revvy, we take the guesswork out of the pricing equation, so that when a property manager logs in, it gives them a recommendation, and they'll know exactly where that recommendation is coming from. So we capitalize on property level data that we're pulling directly from Rent Manager. And we take a look also at what's going on in the market. We use only public data when pulling market data. So we take both of those things, compare them, and then pricing changes on a daily basis, dependent on several different factors.
Like you said, it can be really tedious if you're doing this manually or outside of maybe technology. So maybe let's kind of talk about that part of it. Maybe the historical way that people did it, because doing daily decisions on rental rates didn't exist when you're doing this by hand, and maybe even with spreadsheets or things like that. So how have people historically managed rental rates before tools that allowed people to make daily decisions on pricing?
Yeah, typically folks will call their competitors up, understand how their immediate zip code is doing. If everyone on average is asking $1,500, they should probably be asking $1,500. That's typically how it was done in the past. A lot of Excel work as well, manual data entry, but for the most part, a lot of phone calls to your competition. And as you know, the data that competitors give you might not be 100% accurate because they're trying to run a business as well. So they might not give you the most up-to-date, accurate data when you're calling them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the way that pricing works, especially I would say now, everyone can get access to pricing and product information so quickly, right? So if you have strategies, you're trying to almost keep them to yourselves. And in the past, just blocking the data was a strategy, right? If you didn't know what your competitors were charging, then that gave them an advantage in the marketplace. So that makes sense. Now, and obviously when we're shopping around and calling the other competitors in the market in the local area, we're talking about the market rate. But how does that compare to maybe renewal rates? Because that can be really different. So have you found in the past when people were calling around, were they also asking about renewal rates, or were they really just focused on that market rate?
So that's an awesome question. So when it comes to renewals, it's always really good to understand the relationship between what a resident is currently paying versus what a prospect would be expected to pay for their unit if it was available today. So renewals are as important as new leases to an extent. Almost they're an easier sell because that resident already lives at the property. So again, understanding the relationship between what they're paying versus market, and then applying some parameters. So the folks that are, well below new lease pricing, you might want to increase them, be a little bit more aggressive for those folks. The folks that are at or above new lease pricing, maybe we keep them the same or take more of a conservative approach. And then, if they're somewhere in between, bring them up to new lease pricing without exceeding that point. So to your point, renewals are, I think equally as important as new leases, yeah, when you're talking about pricing strategy.
And if we look at the no tech versus tech solution to renewals, I'm assuming it's relatively similar, except for it's just so much more work. If you have, whether it's 100 units or 1,000 units and you're going through renewals and it's manual, I'm assuming, looking at each one individually and making a human decision every single time you're looking at that resident.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time when we built out the product with the renewal workflow. It's something that does take a significant amount of time, even with automated processes. So at this point, you simply put in your parameters dependent on, what your strategy is, how aggressive, conservative you want to be. Seasonality plays a really big role in how aggressive or conservative you want to be with renewals. Summer months, probably be more aggressive. Winter months, probably less aggressive. So kind of a standard bell curve in terms of being conservative and aggressive with renewals.
Yeah. So for that seasonality piece of it, walk us through that. Why would the time of year change how aggressive you may or may not want to be when it comes to a rent increase?
Yeah. So it's really important to manage expirations. So throughout the year, so that your maintenance teams aren't overwhelmed with a ton of expirations all in a single month, it's important to shift those around to where there is room and you're not overexposed with expirations. So there's a threshold within revenue management tools typically, and if expirations exceed that threshold, there are premiums associated with those months. Really trying to incentivize residents to select months where there is room. So with Revvy and I believe other tools, you get to decide what that threshold looks like. And again, it's a standard bell curve out of the gate. Revenue management tools are comfortable with more expirations in the summer, spring, less in the winter, fall, scaled up and down from there. Obviously, things are going to be different in Arizona, where winters don't play a big role in seasonality. It's actually favorable, but typically it's that standard bell curve.
So what you're saying is, with renewal specifically, not only are you concerned about how much the rental increase may be, but that may change based on how long of a term they agreed to. And you're actually trying to steer the resident to select a certain term that would put the expiration date in a favorable month versus a non-favorable month. And then managing that load over time. That seems like a lot of work.
A lot of work if you're doing it manually. So once you've been implemented into the tool, and you're rocking and rolling, it's a simple click of a button. It will populate your report. All of your renewal offers based on lease term will show up there. And if a resident comes in and says they want a 6-month lease term, the model's already determined whether that lease term is full. And maybe there's an expiration premium associated with that. So trying to incentivize other lease term months for the residents, again, with those premiums. But yeah, balance. And also it just makes the life of your property manager as your leasing team so much easier. They can actually turn these units and not be overwhelmed with, a ton of expirations at the end of the month. They're staggered throughout the month, and they can, chip away at them versus doing them all at once and being very overwhelmed.
Now, when it comes to the renewal terms, it might seem obvious to do 6-month, 12-month, 18-month options on renewal, but obviously your tool or other tools may provide a lot more options. Is there an optimum number of term options that you should be giving a resident at renewal where they're not overwhelmed, but not so few that they don't feel like they have choice?
Yeah, certainly. It's always good to be strategic in how you're sending out your renewal options. Some folks send month to month all the way through 15 months. They give all those options to their residents. The resident can go in and select whatever month they need. A lot of times they'll take the best price. And a lot of clients send out typically a month-to-month, a 6-month, 12-month, just limiting the number of options that you're sending out as to not overwhelm the resident. And then if the resident wants a different lease term option, the property manager could certainly look at the report and say, the 7-month lease term, you'd be paying this.
Yeah, and I think people do enjoy choice, but at some point it becomes overwhelming, right? Where they don't know what choice to make, or they need some guidance, and I think narrowing down the number of options they have is always really beneficial to them. And so thanks for kind of walking us through that renewal process. But obviously, we're not just here to talk about renewals, right? We're talking about the new lease side of it as well. So when we think about the market's done a lot of different things. It's moving back and forth all the time. In general, occupancy rates have been good, right? Supply, maybe not as high as it needs to be in some areas. So how's a tool or using technology to manage revenue helping you to balance your occupancy at the same time? How do those work together?
Great question. So over the past, I would say, few years, things have just been going up and up and up and up. Crazy increases. Over the recent past, things have softened a bit, I think, for the most part. But leveraging a revenue management tool that basically you dump a ton of data into a bucket, and then it organizes all of that data. It runs a ton of calculations. The algorithm does its thing, and then it spits out or recommends an optimized price. And it does that on a daily basis. So we're looking at your supply, demand, leasing activity, what's going on in the market, all of that in relation to your goals, your budgeted occupancy, your rental goals, all of that. And again, it's all automated, and it recommends an increase, a decrease every single day. So whether or not you actually want that to update in your property management system on a daily basis, that's your decision. It could be daily, it could be weekly, monthly, whatever it is. It's really important to have your eyes on what's going on at your property versus the competition. And we're pulling in all of that data daily, so you can see what our model's recommending every single day versus the competition, and kind of where you stand. So it's a nice tool for not only property managers, but executive level folks, just to ensure their assets are performing the way that they're expecting them to perform.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad you shared so much about kind of market conditions and what we've seen recently. And obviously, if things are really volatile, you definitely need to be keeping an eye on things. But even I would say in markets that are moving slower, there's still a lot of value there, because the bottom line is any amount of time that you would spend on this is immense compared to letting technology step in and do it for you. And a lot of times when I think about technology, there's a lot of choices out there and things that you maybe could do or should do. But the ones that save you time and prevent you from getting behind in different areas is really important. When I say getting behind, I don't necessarily mean in completing tasks. That can be one of them. Getting behind in the market, I think, is like the biggest fear for a lot of people if their rates aren't up to what market would allow, right? So now they're losing money because they're undercharging, or if they don't adjust fast enough, if there's a shift, now they're overcharging and their occupancy starts tanking, and they're not even really sure why, because they just haven't been keeping up with what the market's been doing. Is that a common pain point that you hear from people that come and talk to you about your product?
Exactly, especially the folks that have never used revenue management. And a big thing that can happen if you're not managing pricing is, maybe the market has taken off and you've remained static for the past year, or whatever it might be. The demographic that's coming into your property can slowly shift, which maybe you don't want. On both sides. Maybe your prices are way high versus the competition, and it's softened a lot. So yeah, super important to always be managing pricing, and again, for the folks that do it manually, I think they probably monitor it on a monthly basis because it is so tedious. That's at least what I've found as I chat with folks across the country. But capitalizing on shifts in the market sooner than once a month is important.
Yeah, especially like you said, over the past year, things have been changing. The last couple of years, things were changing so quickly. Once a month just was not fast enough, right? You were left behind and you were playing catch up every single month if you were doing that.
Right.
Well, let's talk about kind of the technology, the data side, things like that. So when we think about different types of tools that people are using, like you said, there are ways to do this manually. But what are some of the key reasons somebody really needs to focus in on, or maybe who is the ideal customer for using revenue management software compared to maybe others?
Yeah, so the ideal customer for a revenue management tool would have a decent sample size. And when I say sample size, enough units so that our model can give the best recommendations, if that makes sense. So if you only, if you have 10 units, for example, your supply position is going to change drastically with a single move in or move out versus 100 units. A unit or two isn't going to make as big of an impact on your supply position. So the ideal customer would have a decent amount of units, anywhere from 100 to 10,000 or more. But especially for the folks that have thousands of units, it will just save them a ton of time.
So that's really the key there, is having enough volume that, again, the math can make sense, that it can understand the supply and demand and so forth, but also people that maybe are already investing a lot of time trying to keep up with the market and maybe struggling a little bit, they need some extra help. This is really kind of the place where revenue management steps in for them.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about the data side, because I think that's what a lot of people probably have interest level in. You said it pulls in different types of data, property data, some market data, things like that. Help us understand what that looks like. Like, what is the role of data analytics in a product like this?
Yeah, so it's huge, and especially when we can access that data directly through an API, it makes it so fluid and smooth. So yeah, we essentially pull all of your daily activity in every single night. So around midnight, all of your daily activity comes in, the calculations run, the algorithm runs, and then it recommends a price increase, decrease, or hold. But just being able to have, again, access to that data and organizing that data. And really, we're very agile. So if there's ever a client that wants to see a certain calculation or dashboard, or see what recommendations would look like based on different logic, whatever it is, we're very agile. We can customize that to their specific needs. Just so, we really want to accommodate with the parameters in Revvy, accommodate what our clients are trying to achieve.
So when you speak of all of the daily activity, what does that look like? Is that strictly move-ins and move-outs, or are we looking at also people that have put in notices to vacate with future dates, people that have maybe reserved units or put units on hold for a future lease? What type of data can you get to?
Yeah, so new lease activity, applications coming in, notices, move-ins, move-outs. We look at all of those dates. They're all really important. Trying to think of other data that we're pulling in. Really, all of the lease details for every resident at the property. We're pulling that in every single day. We're obviously not pulling any residents' names in. We just need unit numbers. But all lease detail. Yeah, again, move-ins, move-outs, all of that. So that we can run the calculations in terms of what occupancy looks like, what trend numbers look like, application activity, historical application activity, to understand future forecasted demand. So it's honestly just a ton of data that we're pulling in every single day, and then organizing it, making it look really nice with calculations and graphs and charts, etc.
The application piece is really interesting. I guess I hadn't really thought about that, but you're looking at that to understand, like you said, future demand or current demand. If you're receiving more applications than normal, right, that would show that there's more demand for your units. And therefore, I'm assuming you can be a little more aggressive on the pricing versus if you see a time period go by where the number of applications starts to soften a little bit, you may have to adjust your position.
Exactly. Yeah. If everyone that comes in the door is leasing, that means your rents are probably a little bit too low. So as we see application activity, if it's, every single day you're getting several applications, the model will react with some upward pressure based on that pricing indicator. If there's been a lull in demand or applications and things for a specific floor plan, and when I say floor plan, that's a different piece. But for a specific floor plan, if it's been slower, the model might soften based on the fact that there's not a lot of demand coming in the door. So as far as floor plans go and the way that they're set up in revenue management tools, you have your 1 beds, 2 beds, 3 beds, 4 beds, whatever it might be. And within those floor plans, there can exist multiple different unit types. So you have your 1 beds, maybe you have an A1, A2, A3, A4. So the way that we account for those different unit types would just be with pricing offsets, so that there's always a gap between those different unit types in the floor plan grouping. If the model's recommending an increase in any given day, all of the A1s, all of the A2s, all of the A3s in that group would increase by that amount. But again, we're going to maintain those gaps between those unit types with those pricing offsets.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, to the consumer, the prospective renter, the pricing has to make sense on some level, right? So keeping all of those parameters in place makes sense. And when I think of data too, and I want to know your insights on using the data to really allow the decision to be made on the behalf of the company and letting the technology step in. Actually, in my history, in my past, I worked in the self-storage industry, and in some of my roles, I helped manage increases and stuff like this, but it was many years ago. There wasn't technology doing it for us, so we were using spreadsheets and so forth. So I have some experience in that, and it was always very interesting because inevitably what would happen would be the on-site manager, property manager, would always have a few customers, residents, tenants, whatever you want to call them, that would come in and saying, well, I'm good with all of these price increases. However, these 3 people have special situations. And so we were not letting the data, right, tell us what to do. We were letting, I guess, the human factor step in. Is there a balance there? And how does revenue management software account for the human side of changing pricing, especially I would say on the renewal side?
Yeah, great question. So at the end of the day, it's just a tool. So the software doesn't see what's going on at the property. While it's important to be consistent in renewal offers that you're sending out, you don't want to run into any fair housing issues where you feel bad for this resident, but this resident you don't feel bad for, kind of thing. But it's revenue management tools are just that. They're tools. You certainly have to layer in the human element. So if there's a scenario that obviously the model doesn't see, it's important to take that into account versus just clicking a button, set it and forget it, and and who cares? So again, I think it's important to always recognize that that there is a human element, and it is, super important to take that into account as well.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, because a lot of people fear giving up too much control when they start using new technology solutions. Like, I still want to make the decision for the business. And you even mentioned earlier that just because systems like yours are creating daily price recommendations, it doesn't mean you have to listen to them, right? You can decide to upload weekly or change monthly, whatever you think is best for your business. Now, you talked about reports and dashboards. I'm sure that your system also provides reports that say, hey, this is what we think you should do, and this is kind of the benefit to the business along the way. And if you decide to veer off of that, then obviously you're taking a little bit of risk there in not taking the recommendation based on the data, because at the end of the day, your system really is trying to push data-driven decisions, which most of us claim that we want.
Yeah, exactly. And there are certainly auditing tools within Revvy. So anytime, a property manager leases a unit, their boss will know whether or not they used the recommended price or not. So if you see a variance of 10%, that would be something that you'd certainly bring to their attention. If it's just a couple of percentage points, few percentage points, maybe that's because they were holding the unit and they had a 48-hour rent guarantee, something like that. But yeah, you can certainly go in and verify whether your teams are using the tool the way that they should be or not.
That's great. So with all of this data that's being collected and used to impact rental rates and things like that, impact occupancy, hit goals like you had talked about, what else can you do with that data, or what else are you doing with the data as far as future predictions, things like that?
Yeah, so we're actually building in a few AI machine learning type things into our model. So we've already got a renewal, an AI renewal forecast. So we're not only looking at actual expirations versus a threshold, kind of what we've talked about a few moments ago, but we're also looking at an anticipated renewal conversion, and then layering that in, looking out in the future to come up with an AI renewal forecast. So there are a lot of different things at play, specifically with renewals. And yeah, we're starting to build in some AI there. And then on the new lease side as well, an AI demand forecast type model. We're currently in the process of layering that in. It's more of a predictive model, so you'll be able to compare, what Revvy's recommending just based on, the current model that's set up versus what the AI predictive model would recommend. And then you can accept that AI prediction or not. The cool thing about our model is it's more of an incremental, consistent model versus what you might see elsewhere. So you'll never see in Revvy your prices increase by $200 overnight and then come back down by $200 the next day. So there's never those huge price swings. It's more of a steady incremental model versus those drastic changes that a lot of folks don't like. So yeah, leveraging AI to an extent without letting the model loose. So you have this AI stuff built in, but it's never going to just push it through automatically unless the property manager or whomever gives their stamp of approval.
Yeah, obviously we can't talk technology without talking about AI right now. That's what we're all talking about. And it is important, especially as we think about data and how we use data. But like you just said, I think most people are still wanting to have some level of control over their business and how they make decisions and how it plays into their strategy and where they're headed. And while technology is great, it doesn't always understand those pieces. So allowing the user to still have control is great. So, well, Greg, as we kind of turn the corner and kind of come to the end of the episode, I want to know if somebody is considering a revenue management software tool, they want to use something like this, they want to get away from doing the pen and paper Excel spreadsheet method. What are some of the things they should consider, or what are the next steps they need to think about as they move towards that decision?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is it's going to save them a ton of time. And also, I think one of the most important things is the configurability piece. So when you're going from not using revenue management, you have full control to an extent, to using revenue management, you're putting trust in this new technology or model that it will deliver an optimized price. So it's nice that Revvy's completely configurable. So you get to decide how aggressive or conservative you want to be with these pricing recommendations. And you get to decide, how frequently you want these recommendations to get pushed back to your property management system, rent manager, whatever it might be. It's just completely configurable. You're in the driver's seat, which is really nice. And that's what our clients love. They have access to all of the parameters. We train them on the software, provide them with a user guide detailing out all of the parameters, the impacts of these parameters. So it's just comforting, I think, if I was, a prospective revenue management user, knowing that I'm in the driver's seat, I have the keys, I determine how aggressive or conservative the model's going to be. That would be probably the biggest thing I would look for.
Yeah, and again, I think it goes back to that whole idea of humans still want to make the decision on things, and I think we should, right? We want to be in the driver's seat on those elements. So, well, Greg, if somebody wants to learn more about revenue management and specifically Revvy, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, just on our website, you can learn quite a bit more about Revvy and each of the tools that we offer. Our website is revvyco.com. And then also, if you'd like to run through a demo of the product, you can fill a little form out on our site and someone will get in touch with you and run you through the product.
Excellent. Well, Greg, thanks for being with us. And we will drop a link in the show notes and so forth. So if anyone's interested, they can definitely check things out there. Well, thanks again for being with us, Greg. And to our audience, thanks for listening to another episode. And until next time, keep going beyond rent.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Beyond Rent. If you enjoyed this podcast, spread the word on social media and with your peers in the industry. To be notified when more episodes are released, subscribe using your favorite podcast player. Beyond Rent is brought to you by Rent Manager Property Management Software. Learn more about Rent Manager's industry-leading software solutions at rentmanager.com. Until next time, keep going beyond rent.